Welcome back to Biz Radio Canada on Connect Me Radio. Attracting, engaging, and retaining talent is an ongoing challenge for most businesses. In the ever-changing search for talent, it's important to stay on top of trends in play. To help us with that discussion and bring us up to date on 10 workplace trends is Dr. Tracy Wyland. Dr. Wyland is a thought leader on the impact of technology on society, work, and careers. Dr. Wyland is the author of 11 books, including her newest, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. And we welcome Dr. Tracy Wyland with us from California. Dr. Wyland, how are you doing?
Very good, David. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's my pleasure. So 11 books, all on this topic of technology and society, workplace, and careers. That sounds like quite a span of authoring on your part.
Well, you know, David, it started for me professionally in business, and I was doing a lot of business internationally. So the first, actually, 6 books is on women in leadership and international business. And then as my career evolved and the need for more integration with technology topics started to surface, I switched my direction to be a little more digital and a little more forward-thinking in what's happening in our careers.
Let's talk about the technology and society and in the workplace in general before we get into those trends. Technology has taken over, and I've done a number of interviews with doctors in Canada that have studied the effects of in the workplace, that we just don't seem to get a break anymore. We're tethered to our BlackBerries and our iPhones, and people can get at us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. What impact are you seeing on society and people in the workplace with technology, and we never get a break?
Well, first, David, you know, I think that we have to realize that we shifted from a classical world to a technology-based world.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I really grew up in a classical world. It was more qualitative, and now it's more quantitative. And so, you know, many of the jobs are impacted by technology, and we need, I think, to embrace it. In terms of taking up our time, you might remember that people would say, well, the radio will replace books, and the TV will replace radio, and we have to get our kids off of the computers, you know, because it's taking away from, you know, time. So I think that's structured. You know, you have to understand how to structure your day using the tools, and the tools today that we have are technology tools.
Is technology, when we say it's infringing on our lives because we can't get away from it, is that the generation that didn't grow up with technology, or the millennials saying, hey, you know, this is just part of life, this is how I communicate, and I'm okay with it?
Well, I think you're bringing up a very good point. In fact, this came up in a conference yesterday when we were having a debate on generational differences.
Mm-hmm.
And the millennials, as you mentioned, you know, that's the language that, you know, you use. It seems very slow to pick up a phone or to sit down and have a conversation, and almost disabling. So I think, you know, you're on point there saying, you know, are there generational differences, or just differences in what people grew up with, so they're uncomfortable with other formats.
And you must have the discussion with a number of companies that you consult with regarding technology. A number of companies have said, hey, no Facebook, no texting during office hours. It's like the old days when companies wouldn't let you have a personal phone call during office hours. What's happening in business today? Are companies realizing this is the way that millennials communicate? That when they're texting, where a boomer might have picked up the phone to call a friend for an answer, the millennials are picking up their smartphone and texting for an answer.
Yes, and I think that companies are embracing this. You know, from bringing your own device to having, you know, advice on how to use social technologies, what's appropriate to use inside work versus outside of work. Some companies do have firewalled Facebook types of profiles and LinkedIn profiles. But I think companies are realizing that it actually benefits them if they provide their employees with the tools that they need. And number 2 is it's a consumer marketing tool. So companies need to embrace social media to reach customers, and also to hear the feedback from their customers. So I think companies are becoming a little more savvy about using social technology and enabling their employees to participate in that.
So your advice to those stale, pale males that are running businesses is to calm down and let the young people communicate the way that they need to communicate.
You know what I would tell them? I would say do a Google search on yourself, do a Google search on your company, and just see what comes up. And is it good? Is it bad? And do you need to take action?
If nothing comes up, that sends a message all on its own.
It does, but I think what a lot of people are pretty horrified is that they're finding that their companies have been mentioned on different social media boards, some positive and sometimes not so positive.
Let's talk about your newest book, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. What was the impetus for the book? Why did you write this? Were you not satisfied with the first 10? What happened?
It actually was a continuum. So I'll tell you what happened. That when I wrote Society 3.0 and talked about how technology was changing society, work, and education and careers, this mantra of careers and jobs just kept coming back to me. That look, Tracy, the world has shifted. There's a lot of people working part-time. There's a lot of people who can't find jobs, and there's a lot of jobs out there that can't be filled. And so the reality was, okay, we have shifted in our careers as well. Mm-hmm. What can I look at? So I looked at a 360-degree view of careers, from the view of people looking for jobs, people who found jobs, from recruiters, and actually HR executives who were trying to fill open positions. And, what does it take today to be employed for life? And employed for life today is 60 years, if you can wrap your head around that, versus what many of us have been told would only be 20 to 30 years.
Well, I think I'm on Freedom 75 now, so I'm looking forward to retirement in about 20 or 30 years. Now, what happens? What's different about the employment circle in today's careers? We hear about those millennials that they are not going to go to work for an employer for 20, 30, 40 years like our parents did, where they came out of high school, they went to work for a company, and they stayed there with the company until they're 65 years old. What's different about the millennials and the generations that follow? What's their career path going to look like?
So for the millennials, their career path will probably be just as you described it. They will be switching careers or making more lateral moves or switching firms every 4 years, and in some cases even more often. And which means that if you're working for 50 or 60 years, you're going to cycle through a lot of experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good point to bring up, is that it is about collecting experiences today and building your skills. I think a shift today from yesterday is that the company used to take care of people, give them instructions about their careers, and really position them around the firm. Today, you need to be much more entrepreneurial as an employee and, develop your own really talent management plan. Where am I going to, take my next steps? And have the company participate in that. So I think that is a big shift from previous generations.
What's the average stay now for a millennial or a Gen Y, I guess would be the next generation in there? Is it, are they staying for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? And if it's 5 years, what's keeping them there?
So for an adult, and again, so this is from U.S. numbers, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. An adult in the U.S. is staying in a job for 4 years, 4 months, and a millennial is staying in their jobs around 2 years, 4 months. I think what's more important is that whatever opportunity you pursue, make sure that you achieve something. Moving means nothing to an employer. Mm-hmm. Quantifiable success and contribution means a lot to an employer. So if I, as an executive, am going to hire someone, if I look at someone's resume who moved every 2 years but accomplished absolutely nothing, I would say that could be a job hopper, someone who can't hold a job.
So you want to see that upward, you want to see it moving upward.
That's right, but I want to see metrics. I want to see that if you joined a Salesforce and you're telling me in 2 years that you made a contribution, I want to see metrics that says you have contributed and increased sales by X percent, or you have expanded the client base by Y percent.
So natural charm and good looks isn't going to work anymore.
That's right. So I think you have to remember that contribution is key, and employers are looking for that.
My guest is Dr. Tracy Wyland. We're going to take a short break and have a few words from our sponsors, and we will be back with more Biz Radio Canada on Connect Me Radio with Dr. Tracy Wyland and 10 workplace trends. Welcome back to Biz Radio Canada on Connect Me Radio. My guest is Dr. Tracy Wyland, and we are talking about her latest book, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends, and in particular, 10 workplace trends. Dr. Wyland, from an employer's perspective, what are the workplace trends that the employer needs to pay attention to in order for them to attract, engage, and retain the great talent for as long as they possibly can?
Well, and it's a good question, David, because I think the workplace has absolutely changed. So the first thing I would look for in an employee is, someone who contributes. Let's face it, the world is very competitive. Succession planning is starting at a much younger age. Mm-hmm. And I think when you bring in new employees, you want them to be more entrepreneurial, and you want to help them secure leadership positions sooner rather than waiting until they're 40, 50, or 60. So I think that's number one.
Are you suggesting that it's not good enough to just show up anymore, that you actually have to bring something to the party now?
Yes, and I think a loyal worker is something that many of us have been groomed to be, mm-hmm. and we have been, paid well, in benefits for being a loyal worker, but it's more today, and it's really because the world is much more competitive. So we need all hands on deck, working managers, people who are putting on that CEO hat in their job and being able to help the company move ahead.
How do you manage a workplace that has a lot of leaders? There has to be some followers along the way somewhere. If everybody's got the CEO hat on and everybody wants to be in charge, how do you manage that?
Right. And it's actually today not about individual contribution anymore. It's about teams. So leadership has even evolved to becoming someone who can lead other leaders and be able to work on teams, whether as a team player or a team leader or a team contributor. And I think that's one of the soft skills that many companies are looking for today, much more so than in the past, is because, you can't create products anymore individually. You can't create ideas individually. You really need a team where everyone has a role, a communication plan, and is organized and moving in a direction.
You mentioned earlier that the millennials are staying in a job for just over 2 years, and young adults, I imagine that's the Gen Ys, are staying for just over 4 years. I understand from some millennials or some HR professionals that they're saying the reason that they're moving, the reason that millennials don't stay, is because they're not being challenged and they're not being given enough opportunities. Do you agree with that statement, or do you have your own perspective?
Well, that is true, and that is one of the reasons why millennials will move. I think that connects to that they don't feel that they're being appreciated or they're being looked over because of their age. And I think second is that millennials, more so than other generations, want to find meaning in their jobs. They have grown up and watched their parents be bored or put up with a bad boss or just not be in the right career, and they don't want to have that same experience. So they will continue to explore until they find something that fits well for them. So I think there's a number of factors there.
In your opinion, what's a key thing that will help attract that millennial worker, or for the matter, a Gen Y, a Gen X? They're still in the workplace along with the boomers, but the ones that they're looking to attract now in that race for talent are the millennials and the generation that follows that. What do companies need to do to attract that great talent?
Yes, and I agree. And I think it's all people want to be able to feel like they have some sort of input and control in their job and in their direction, and that their contributions are being appreciated. So as an executive, I would encourage people to help employees find lateral moves. Mm-hmm. Let them move around the firm and try different opportunities so they can build their skill sets. Introduce them to special projects and high visibility projects that may be different than what they're doing day to day. So if they're in marketing and there's a technology project, encourage them to join it. I think culture is becoming increasingly important. people want to work for a firm that they can identify with. And we went through a period where financial firms, for example, were having a tough time attracting people because of the culture and the viewpoint that they were, not positive firms to work for. So I think companies need to create cultures and environments that really sync up with the value system of employees, whether it's giving back or community outreach or contributions, from their sales to various charities and needed organizations. So I think there's a number of factors today different than in the past that we can really use to attract employees.
How do we deal with this in the small to medium-sized business? I know the stats are very similar on both sides of the border. 80, 85%, 90% of businesses are small to medium-sized businesses. They don't have those opportunities built into their structure in order to give those young people lateral movements, upward movements, those big projects to work on. What advice do you have for them? What can they do to still play well in that talent pool?
Actually, I encourage young people to make stops in startup firms and also small to medium-sized firms. And the reason is I think the leadership opportunities are more plentiful than in a large firm. And number two is you get the chance to wear many, many hats all at the same time. So you actually don't have to create that lateral move that you might need in a large firm because you're in the firing line every single day. And if you can respond and lead in that kind of environment, then you'll be developing yourself as a leader. So I think it's really mixing large, small, and startup experiences will help, develop a person to be tomorrow's leader.
So someone that's working in a small firm, they actually get to really experience that entrepreneurial hat or entrepreneurial number of hats that you get to wear on a daily basis.
Oh, absolutely, and that's where the growth is. I mean, the leadership growth is not in the large firms. I mean, there's, you have to wait for people to retire. They may be going through transitions and laying off. It's the young firms and the small firms that are, in high growth areas where you could actually join and move up your levels fairly quickly compared to a large firm. So I would not look at some of these small, medium-sized firms because I think there's a lot more opportunity for people there.
We are talking with Dr. Tracy Wyland, the author of 11 books, including her newest book, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. You're listening to Biz Radio Canada on Connect Me Radio, and we will return with Dr. Wyland right after a few words from our sponsors. Welcome back to Biz Radio Canada on Connect Me Radio. My guest is Dr. Tracy Wyland, the author of 11 books, including her latest, Employed for Life, 21st Century Career Trends. We're talking about those career trends and what employers can do from their perspective to attract, engage, and retain great talent. So that's an interesting perspective that you had just before the break, Dr. Wyland, that you're encouraging young people to go and work at those smaller companies because they really get to express their entrepreneurial trends. How are the businesses accepting young people into the mix? Because when young people come into the mix or come into those small businesses, generally they don't have a lot of workplace experience, and smaller businesses are notorious for not having great training. So how can the two coexist?
Yes, and you're bringing up a good point, and I would say a lot of the startups, it's all hands on deck, and if you're smart, you will figure it out. And people, interesting enough, do rise to that leadership opportunity. More interesting, I hear about more firms trying to think through externships, and this is quite interesting, actually. How can I rotate high quality, leadership track young people maybe for a stint in a large firm and then rotate them out to a client or customer who might be a small firm so that that employee can get that 360 visibility of the business. And I think that you're finding that companies are looking for these types of really talent management strategies on how can I help a young person develop the skills and experience that they need while still being there, enthusiastic and innovative. So an externship is something that firms are talking about, as well as internships. Can I rotate someone around in the firm in multiple short stops, or some people call it tours of duty, so that they can pick up different experiences. So it is a challenge, but I think you'll hear more often than not, particularly in some of these younger firms, that if you have a good thought process, you have good leadership skills and communication, development processes, that you'll be able to start to pick up experiences and thrive.
So it's really the cream is going to have to rise to the top, and it's survival of the fittest in that entrepreneurial pond.
Yes, and I think that does go back to one of the points we had talked about earlier, is this entrepreneurial employee. Take control of your career versus the company is going to take control of your career and give you guidance. And if you can help your employees really embrace that, like what are you going to do? What are the stops you want to make? What are some of the experiences? And they don't always have to happen inside the firm. I know a number of adults and younger people who join organizations to really expand their experiences, whether it's a board or whether it's the PTA for their kids' school or volunteering for an organization to pick up external skills. All of these skills count. It doesn't matter if they're in the firm or outside the firm. It's really, your ability to pick up some of these leadership skills, P&L skills, operation skills.
Are you seeing that the employers are embracing this as well? I'm thinking that you've got some people that have been in business for a while, and they're saying, I've got this young whippersnapper coming in here telling me how to run my business. They think they know everything, and they know nothing. So how is this entrepreneurial employee being embraced by that small business owner?
Yes, and I think that is a good point. It varies. It absolutely varies, and I think when you talk to people, this is why I think companies should survey their employees on a regular basis to take a pulse of what's happening in their firm. People say to me, they're leaving because they're not getting challenged or respected. Well, that's probably a firm that isn't paying attention to or respecting the contributions of all the generations in their workforce, and so they will lose talent. And right now, I don't think companies can afford to lose, excellent talent. So I would say it varies by company. Companies who have high demand or high aspirations for leadership and, skilled workers will find ways to help them achieve their goals.
We've talked about attracting great talent and engaging the great talent. What's your best piece of advice for those employers that need to focus on retaining that great talent?
Yes, I think that the employers need to think about creating environments for their employees from day one. Many employers have very structured leadership programs that start after employees have figured out the system and managed to get to a senior manager or director role. We don't have time for that anymore. As an employer, we need to, from the day of orientation, set the stage for employees who want to move ahead, want to gain experience and leadership opportunities, that can happen in the firm. And we can do that by creating environments where they can have more meaningful roles, contributions, and projects to get there.
Excellent. Dr. Wyland, thanks.